Okay, welcome and thank you for joining us today for our webinar entitled On-Farm Produce Safety for Small Growers in the Age of COVID-19. This webinar is brought to you by a team of individuals from Michigan State University Extension and the produce safety technicians from the Michigan Conservation Districts. We would also like to thank the Michigan Food and Farming Systems team for their input and the promotion of this webinar today. I'm going to go over the agenda real quick so we know some of the topics we're going to be discussing, and then we'll go over a few housekeeping details, and then we'll get started. So the agenda today includes short presentations about the basics of COVID-19 and how to determine a reputable information source. We're also going to discuss cleaning and sanitizing and disinfecting and the differences. Then there will be a grower-to-grower presentation about best practices in today's quickly changing production and retail environments on the farm. And last, we will have a discussion about employee health and hygiene. At the end of the program today, we will do a question and answer session, and we're going to use the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom app to do this. If you do not have access to Zoom today, like you're connected by phone, you could email us your questions and we will reply to you in an email with the answers as best we can. That email address is gaps@msu.edu. That's gaps@msu.edu. So regarding questions, in the event that we are not able to answer all of the questions that we have received today, there's a lot of participants on the call today. We will try and answer any that haven't been taken care of in an email that we follow up with. If you would like to receive a follow-up email with these questions answered or other resources and information about resource folks in your area, please email us at that GAPS email address or fill out the Google form at the end of this webinar. All right, I think that's all the housekeeping details, so we will start our program. Up first is Phil Tocco from Michigan State University Extension.
Thanks, Heather. My name is Phil Tocco. I'm with MSU, Michigan State Extension, based in Jackson County, but covering the entire state with on-farm produce safety. And I've been doing this since 2009. Next slide, please. So some content in these talks were taken with permission from Always Be Cleaning and Sanitizing and Understanding Disinfection. This was a webinar given last Friday by NC State University. We did ask them for permission to use some of the slides. They did grant it. The folks that put that together were Lynette Johnson, Chip Simmons, Alina Rogers, and Chris Gunter, all of NC State University. Next slide. So to start things out, I have to say I'm not a microbiologist. I've had one or two microbiology classes. I know a number of microbiologists and am friends with them and have worked with them. However, I am not a microbiologist. And so up front, as we're talking about microbiology, it's not something that I had a ton of schooling in. So I'm coming at it from a somewhat different perspective. Second, what scientists know is changing really rapidly. This coronavirus, this novel coronavirus, is called novel for a reason. It's brand new. We aren't even still sure how it got into humans from the other animals that were typically dealing with this. Our goal really in doing all of this is to really help you ask the right questions going forward so that you can come up with a plan for how to proceed in the season. Because decisions need to be made now in order to actually to do well in the season. Next slide. So to begin with, let's talk a little bit about the differences between bacteria and viruses. First off, bacteria can be free living and they can reproduce outside of a host. So they actually live, they reproduce, they don't have to be inside of a host. They also, so when it comes to control, minimizing not only the sources of contamination, like the amount of bacteria that come into a system, but also controlling the environment, whether that be the acidity of the environment, if it's a system like inside of a jar, or if it's the temperature of an area, or how much oxygen is in an environment, all those sort of the fat toms, if you will, by controlling those different types of environmental factors, you can really reduce the growth of bacteria. Viruses are a completely different thing. They need a host to survive. They aren't really free living in any stretch of the word. In fact, some people don't even consider them living at all. They can't reproduce outside of a host. So really minimizing the source of contamination to stop the spread is so very important. If whoever is carrying the virus, if you can minimize those carriers into a system, you can very well eliminate viruses from a particular environment. Next slide. COVID-19 is the infectious disease caused by the novel coronavirus. Now, just like with, for those of you who are familiar with the disease anthracnose, if you've ever had anthracnose on tomatoes or corn, we call the disease anthracnose, but the causal organism that causes anthracnose is a bacteria in the genus Calototricum. So whether it's on tomatoes or corn, there's two different Calototricum species that cause one for tomatoes and one for corn. In the same way, COVID-19 is the disease like anthracnose, and the causal organism is severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 or SARS-CoV-2. So in the same way, that would be like what we call Calototricum species. Now, SARS-CoV-2 is an enveloped virus. It's wrapped in sort of a fatty phospholipid coat. And it's different than norovirus or hepatitis A, which are foodborne, in that those critters are non-enveloped. So typically a virus is really a piece of RNA or DNA, either wrapped in protein or wrapped in this fatty phospholipid coat. Now, if you've got a virus that's got a fatty phospholipid coat, it can survive it's usually not very robust. It tends to break down very quickly on surfaces, fairly quickly. Whereas those non-enveloped viruses can last for weeks on surfaces. Usually envelope viruses only last for a couple of days. Now, the other thing you need to understand is each of these viruses embedded in their coats have receptors, which are kind of like the hooks on Velcro. If you rub across the hooks on Velcro, you really won't feel much. You can even rub it across cotton or rub it across your flannel and it won't really stick to you. But if you take that Velcro and rub it across the woolly part of Velcro, it's going to stick tight. In the same way, their receptor sites, when they get to a tissue that they bind with, they'll bind immediately. Now, the hooks on norovirus and hepatitis A those receptor sites are embedded in proteins, and those proteins are tough to break down. With SARS-CoV-2, those hooks, those receptor sites are embedded in fat, in a phospholipid fatty coat. So the nice thing is soaps, when we use soaps, typically with norovirus and hepatitis A, all we can hope for with the soap is to have the virus wash off the surface. With SARS-CoV-2, if we use soaps and surfactants, we actually will break down the outside coating because it's fat, and soaps are surfactants that break down and separate fats to get them off the surface. So we're not only just washing off the virus, but we're actually helping to denature the virus and deactivate it. Now, the symptoms with this are fever, cough, shortness of breath, and muscle pain, as well as some lesser ones are muscle pain, sore throat, and diarrhea. Now, next slide, please. Now, when it comes to disease transmission, it is person to person. And like I said, with those hooks, this is a respiratory disease. So it won't bind, those receptor sites won't bind to your skin, it won't bind you to your GI tract, but it will bind to your respiratory tract. It is a person-to-person disease. You have to get in close contact with a person who's coughing, who's sneezing, who's talking, who's breathing in your presence to actually get the virus. And the other tricky thing with this one is even when you don't have symptoms, you can spread the disease. It takes between 2 and 14 days to show the symptoms. The average is 5 days. So during that time, a person can infect a lot of people. Most research suggests one person will infect 3 people over the course of a day. So if you multiply that out, so you've got one person infecting 3 people, then those 4 people infecting 3 people, and so on and so on. One person can actually infect over 2,000 people in just 7 days, all without knowing that they actually have the virus. So it's really, really, really important to do all of this social distancing and stuff. Next slide. Now, prevention is our only tool. Absolutely, hand washing is your number one defense against getting this virus. Washing your hands before you smoke and after you smoke, before and after you eat, before starting work, before taking breaks, after taking breaks, so that if you pick it up during break, you get you get it off your hands. Because of that, the fact that that soap denatures the actual virus, it's really, really important to keep your hands exceedingly clean, and not, for instance, as well as keeping your distance from other people, at least 6 feet away. Cover your coughs and sneezes, and keep unwashed hands away from your face. And again, the other nice thing is alcohol-based sanitizers with better than 60% alcohol will denature that fatty coat and will render them not viable. Unlike with norovirus or hepatitis A, where you have very limited effect with regards to those sanitizers. Next slide. Now, with regards to surface survival, we have to understand that we don't really know what role contaminated surfaces play in disease transmission at this point. There have been studies within the last month. They were lab studies looking at survivability. They've seen survivability in the air for up to 3 hours. They've seen survivability on copper for 4, cardboard for a full day, stainless steel for 2 days, and plastics for 3 days. Again, these are laboratory studies. These are not necessarily looking at the real world viability of this virus with exposure to sunlight and UV and drying out and those kinds of things. So we need to recognize, as much as this has been worked out in a lab setting, we really don't know what role contaminated surfaces play. Next slide, please. Now, the other thing we need to keep in mind is that this virus can be inactivated pretty easily with some disinfectants. They're strong, but it can be done. With ethanol, you can see anywhere between a 2-log and a 4-log reduction. With hydrogen peroxide, you can see a 4-log reduction. And with bleach, you can see a 3-log reduction. It's important to note, and we'll be discussing this later, that the disinfectant you use must be labeled for control, not necessarily of coronavirus, but of other viruses of what you're aiming for. EPA List N has a full accounting of formulations and active ingredients. We'll be including that in documentation going out to participants. Next slide, please. The last main point I want to make is that SARS-CoV-2 is not likely foodborne. CDC, FDA, the World Health Organization, and European health agencies all report that there is currently no evidence to support that food or food packaging materials is associated with transmission of SARS-CoV-2. So understand, the main way this thing gets transmitted is person to person. Fomites or the having viruses on surfaces, and those surfaces being sort of a method of transmission does not seem to be the method that's the highest priority. What is the highest priority is person-to-person contact. So now I'd like to turn it over to Michelle Jacob. She's going to be presenting how to tell whether or not a source is reputable or not.
Hello everyone, my name is Michelle Jacobs and I'm a produce safety technician serving Northwest Lower Michigan. I cover 5 counties in northern Michigan to help growers who are looking for assistance in terms of produce safety. So I help them implement practices on their farm for produce safety.
Heather, can you go to the next slide, please? So how do we determine a reputable source? I think it's all very clear that we live in the age of information, and it's very readily available and in the palm of our hands. So how do we figure out how a source is credible? So credibility is the likelihood that something enables a person to form accurate beliefs and use them to make to use them to make effective decisions, especially ones relevant to their lives, or at least avoids decreasing the accuracy of someone's beliefs or the efficacy of their decisions. So a source is informative if it can help you form accurate beliefs, which can be used to make decisions, and we can believe that it is true. Next slide, please. So how do we navigate a credible, reputable source? This might kind of feel like a high school research paper when you're trying to weed out resources that might seem relevant to what you're trying to figure out information for. So some factors to consider are the author's expertise or the author credentials, who published it. So this could go with the author, who was the publisher, and the origin of the document or information. Is that accurate or objective? Can the facts be found elsewhere? So if you're finding certain facts, can you research those facts and find other credible sources that are stating those facts? And is there any point of view? So if there's a point of view, could it introduce potential bias, or are you able to see all sides of the issue or the information? Peer review. So that goes back to the author's expertise and publisher. If it's been reviewed by other pertinent people that are able to provide accuracy of that information, when was that published, or the timeliness of the information? So when was it created? Is it current? This is especially important now as more information is coming out and evolving. We need to make sure that information is being updated. Footnotes or bibliographies, are there legitimate references that these people are referring to? And can those sources add credibility and depth? Is the information sponsored? So who is that parent organization if it's sponsored, and is that a reputable source? And the appropriateness. So make sure it's appropriate and it's not going off on tangents. Next slide, please. So using the CRAP test. So I found this online, and the source is up there in the right corner. And this is especially probably funny for us because we're food safety people and we like to talk about poop. So this might be a good way to remember this test for all you online here. So the currency, the timeliness of the information, when was it put out there? Has it been revised or updated? Is it current, out of date for your topic? Are the links functional? Relevance, the importance of the information for your needs. So especially with farming, are we making sure that the information that you're getting about COVID is relevant to your operation and your system? Authority, the source of the information. So that goes back to the author, the publisher, the source, the sponsor. Who are they? Do they have expertise in this field? Can we rely that that information is going to be factual? And that goes to accuracy. So the reliability and truthfulness and correctness of the content. And the purpose is, why does this information exist? So anything relevant to what's going on right now, why is this information coming out? Is it updated? Is it current? Are there any potential biases integrated into that? Next slide, please. So these are some questionable sources. If you feel that information might be biased or opinion-based, make sure to fact check and cross-reference for accurate information. So some sources that may mislead are things like social media. So you might see a meme or a GIF out there that you think that's maybe true, or personal blogs, uncited materials. Some of the news might not have accurate information, so that's a good time to cross-reference. Wikipedia, any out-of-date materials, especially when information is evolving. Word of mouth, so is your neighbor telling you something that they heard from so-and-so, and it's this chain of word of mouth that's not necessarily true. And then potentially non-scholarly sources, so these are ideas not necessarily based off research. Next slide, please. So questionable sources. We want to try and fight misinformation. So below here is a little infographic from the World Health Organization. And there was some information going around about taking a hot bath and if that helped with reducing your chance of getting this virus or potentially preventing it. And the World Health Organization was like, Well, no, that's not accurate. So they put out this Mythbuster page and gave you the facts on that. So definitely check your facts, consider the source and the source's source. Check your own biases. Is that information constructive? Is it giving you a path to help you make an informative decision? Be empathetic. Don't try and always be right, but try to be helpful and get to your solution. And don't spread panic, spread the facts. Next slide, please. So here are some examples of reputable sources for COVID-19. These are the people and the organizations that are on the front line of all of this information. So these are people like the Center for Disease Control, the World Health Organization, relevant medical professionals and researchers or other public health professionals, and various universities or university extension organizations that are doing the research on this. And in addition, people like MSU, produce safety technicians, MIFs, all the people that are hosting this webinar, they are good secondary sources, and they can get you the information that is coming from these main primary sources. So we'll follow up this webinar with some reputable resources pertaining to farming and food systems so that you can get those from organizations that are relevant to you. So that's all I have on that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So my name is Jay Gerhardt. I work for Michigan State University Extension down in Washtenaw County. I am a local foods coordinator, which means I help farmers and food businesses make more money. I am going to talk about cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting. And this is important because, as Phil said, cleaning and sanitizing is very effective against the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And that is because of its nature as an envelope virus. A lot of this information for some of you will be repeat, but it's always a good reminder. And we wanted to spend some time talking about this because for many small farms, you might not have a food safety plan in place. And so this is good information to start implementing now, even if you haven't been doing so already. Next slide. So the difference between cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting. Cleaning you do for all surfaces. It is the physical removal of soil and residue, and you use a detergent. Sanitizing is for mainly food contact surfaces. Its main point is to reduce the number of microorganisms on that surface, and you use a sanitizer to accomplish that. And for disinfecting, this will be for non-food contact surfaces. The treatment is used to destroy or inactivate all infectious organisms, and you'd use a disinfectant. And we'll get into all three of these now. Next slide. So the basic steps for cleaning and sanitizing, those first two columns, you have to first clean the debris off. Either by scraping it off or washing it off, and then number two, using a detergent and creating those suds, those soaps. The soap is effective in inactivating that SARS-CoV-2 virus because of its nature. Step 3, rinsing off that detergent and the excess particles. And step 4, using a sanitizer to wipe down that surface. Next slide. So what is the difference between detergents and sanitizers? Detergents are non-EPA regulated. They help with cleaning off the dirt. Again, those bubbles are inactivating envelope viruses. And examples of these detergents could be Simple Green, Green Clean, CS223. Sanitizers, on the other hand, are EPA registered. So they are going to be tested for whatever they're claiming that that they sanitize against. On the label, you want to look for the words that it sanitizes food contact surfaces. These sanitizers are not going to have artificial scents and perfumes. And that is because you don't want like a lemon scent in your spinach when it's touching your food contact surface. These sanitizers are tested for bacterial pathogens. So Phil talked a little bit about the difference between bacteria and viruses. These are because bacteria they repopulate outside of a host. These sanitizers are very important for combating our bacterial pathogens. And examples of sanitizers include germicidal bleach, Sanidate, and again, reading this label is extremely important for understanding how your sanitizer works. Next slide. Key factors when you're sanitizing. The surface must be clean. If you have debris still on that surface, your sanitizer is going to be ineffective at doing what it is supposed to do. You really want to follow these concentration levels. The concentration plus the time equals the effectiveness rate. For example, 1 tablespoon of regular bleach per gallon is a common sanitizer sanitation level that we see. But again, please read the label. That will tell you everything you need to know and follow it to a T. Don't increase those levels just because you're trying to kill a virus that's a scary virus. Please follow the label. And do not mix the sanitizer with any disinfectants. This can cause for example, mustard gas. So please only use the sanitizer, do not mix them. And then keep tools dedicated for the use on these food contact surfaces. Don't oscillate between one rag being used for your sanitizing of food contact surfaces and disinfecting non-food contact surfaces. All right, next slide. So moving on to disinfecting our non-food contact surfaces. First step is to identify what is a food contact surface and what is a non-food contact surface. I have 2 pictures here. One is from my friend Michelle at the Green Things Farm Collective. That bin that she is harvesting spinach into is a food contact surface because that food is touching a surface. The door handle, on the other hand, is a non-food contact surface because food is not actually contacting it, rather humans are contacting it. Next slide. So let's talk about disinfecting these high touch non-food contact surfaces. So as I said, first is to identify them. Common high touch surfaces are doorknobs, touch screens on your point of sale, bathrooms, any eating facilities, hand washing facilities. For these disinfectants, you're going to want to use a higher concentration. What we're seeing from NC State University and other sources are a recommendation of 5 tablespoons per gallon or 4 teaspoons per quart for the SARS-CoV-2. But again, read the label of whatever disinfectant you're using. You want to remember to wear proper PPE. I don't know if any of you have had a high concentration of bleach on your hands before, but it stinks and it feels bad. So please remember to wear gloves when using these products. And you can use disinfecting wipes, but you must follow the label directions. And often you'll need to use more wipes than you think necessary in order to maintain that that concentration rate for it to be effective. And the frequency, which I will go into a little bit more, is you want to be doing this more often than you're doing the food contact surfaces. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about sanitizers versus disinfectants. They're both EPA registered. And again, sanitizers are used on food contact surfaces while disinfectants are used on non-food contact surfaces. And the reason is because these sanitizers are reducing, not eliminating the bacterial load. And in disinfectants, they're destroying or inactivating all the infectious microorganisms, which includes viruses and fungi in addition to these bacteria. And because of this, we have a lower concentration and a shorter contact time with sanitizers. Usually that sanitizer staying wet for about 1 minute is effective. And for disinfectants, that higher concentration and a longer contact time, such as 10 minutes, to really destroy and inactivate all of those microorganisms. For sanitizers, as I said before, they cannot have artificial scents, whereas in disinfectants, we often see artificial scents such as lemon scent. Sanitizers are tested against bacterial pathogens only, whereas disinfectants are effective against all bacteria, viruses, and fungi, and because they're EPA registered, must be tested against every organism they claim to kill. Sanitizers are used throughout the food industry, where disinfectants are mostly used in hospitals, nursing homes, hotels, as examples. But now that we're fighting a stronger disease, this is why it's now coming into our farm recommendations to use on non-food contact surfaces around our farms or when distributing food. Next slide. So the frequency, we want to be cleaning every day, all the time, as most of you can probably imagine. We want to sanitize our food contact surfaces and our non-food contact surfaces at least once per day. And for non-food contact surfaces, we can sanitize daily, weekly, monthly, whatever is seems most appropriate. With disinfecting, the recommendation from NC State is to at least disinfect twice per day for those high-touch surfaces. And so many of you are probably asking at this point, well, how do I actually implement this onto my farm? Next slide. So we recommend putting together a schedule, listing the equipment or tools that needs to be cleaned, taking inventory of what are those food contact surfaces that should be sanitized, what are those non-food contact surfaces that should be disinfected, and creating a schedule and assigning employees to regularly clean those surfaces. So this is an example here on the slide where there's 3 columns, one that lists the equipment, one that lists the cleaning frequency, another that lists the person responsible. I would also recommend having a 4th column that says, is this a disinfectant or is this a sanitation type cleaning? And then really assigning these employees to these certain tasks to ensure that they get done. Next slide. The other consideration I wanted to throw out there for farms is that the CDC, while the CDC says that materials are a rather low risk, this is because the industry standard for farms is to use new or clean packaging. Many small farms receive packaging back from their customers because they're practicing being green and saving the environment. But this is not the time to be doing that. So please remember to use new or clean packaging in your distribution of food. The other thing I wanted to say with this is that the recommendations from the CDC also say that the food packaging is low risk because it's traveling for days in a variety of environments like refrigerators and freezers and out in the sun. And so that is helping to eliminate or deactivate these viruses, but we really have to be careful that because our packaging is not traveling for days, to really be hyper vigilant about that packaging and the cleanliness of it. All right, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Are you there, Rebecca?
Yep, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thanks, Heather. My name's Rebecca Henderson, and I'm the CSA and Wholesale Manager for Green Wagon Farm. We are an organic vegetable farm located in Ada, which is about 20 minutes from downtown Grand Rapids. We have about 18 acres that is owned by the farm, but we grow on about 7 acres. And then we, some of our 3 major sales outlets are, we operate a year-round CSA. We also attend 2 farmers markets throughout the year. And then we have a handful of wholesale accounts that we provide to year-round. So I thought I'd start out by quickly speaking a little bit about how we normally operate these 3 major sales channels of ours, and then explain how things have changed over the last month in response to everything and how we're constantly adapting and improving our systems. So the way that we normally operate our CSA, we have a year-round CSA, like I mentioned, of about 100 shares that run for 12 months. The CSA pretty much doubles when we start our summer CSA for 6 months, for the months of June through October. The way our CSA normally works is that we operate 2 CSA pickups each week. These pickups are set up kind of like farmers market style, where our members are able to choose exactly what they want each week. So we usually don't do any pre-packing of anything. And then another big sales outlet of ours, it's kind of 50-50 between our CSA program and our farmers markets, but we attend the Fulton Street Farmers Market right here in Grand Rapids year-round on Saturday, so we're still attending that. The other market that we attend is the Holland Farmers Market, which is about 45 minutes from us. We do this in the summer months throughout May, from May to November. And then our final sales channel that I mentioned previously is that we do have some wholesale accounts. We sell year-round to a handful of local restaurants in the area, mostly Grand Rapids area, as well as to Harvest Health, which is one of our local grocery stores here in the area. So over the past months, or past 1 month, these channels have changed pretty significantly for us. We are thankfully keeping our CSA program alive, and so that's been great. To be able to do this, we pretty much had to completely change our entire model within a matter of about 2 days. We are now pre-packing everything. We're pre-packing every share and are actually doing what we are calling drive-through style pickups to eliminate as much exposure and interactions with others as possible. So this is what our Tuesday CSA pickup at the farm looks like. So we set out tables at the pickup point next to our barn. We have different sections marked out on these tables for our 3 different share sizes. And what happens is members drive up and they get out of their cars and grab their weekly share size off the table themselves. Luckily, our driveway at the farm is great for this. It kind of goes in a loop, so it works well, and we have signs everywhere directing people where to go and where they should drive. And the first week that we did this, we kind of switched things up since then. The first week, we implemented these drive-through pickups, which was completely new to us. We were first just having folks stay in their cars, and we were handing their shares through their windows, actually. But we felt like this still allowed for somewhat close contact for our staff members and for our CSA members. We found that we were opening car doors for people, and we kind of wanted to eliminate those steps. So that's why we moved to this new system of just placing their shares on the table. That created more space between our staff members and for our CSA members. So far, it's going pretty well. So that's exciting. Next slide. So this is kind of another view of a car pulling up. We do have someone staffing our pickups so that just in case members have questions or, and we still want to sign folks in and make sure they are grabbing the right share size. So next slide. That's just kind of another view of us restocking the tables. And then next slide. And then this is our Wednesday pickup. This is our second pickup of the week. We do this at the Fulton Street Farmers Market on Wednesday. So we just drive our truck. This is another great location that works well for this system. We drive our truck there. We keep the shares inside. Or actually, sorry, we kind of set it up as the same style. We set it up on tables. We have a sign that says stop here, so people know where to stop their car and they get out and grab their share size. So for the past month, this new system of ours has unfortunately eliminated the option for our members to choose exactly what they want each week. But for the past few weeks, we have been pretty diligent about researching new online platforms to help us manage our CSA program, mainly to still be able to provide the option for our members to customize their shares each week. So because we very much value the ability for our members to choose what they want each week, and we know that this is a huge reason why some of our members chose our CSA in the first place, finding this new online platform has been a top priority for us. So we actually made a final decision last week to go with a platform called Farmigo. And for us, we believe that this platform will serve our CSA members the best, and is one that we also believe will integrate with our current system the best. So actually these past few days, I've kind of had my head buried in my computer as we're now importing all of our information into this new system. And as we actually want to get it up and running next week. So that's kind of crazy, but so that's what I'm kind of frantically working on right now. But this will pretty much allow our members to sign in to their account through this website and customize their share online. So that's great. Next slide. So I can speak a little bit about our new system at Fulton Street Farmers Market. The market has remained open throughout all of this. They have done a tremendous job with providing updates for their vendors and giving guidelines and providing signs throughout the market for customers to read, and sharing information through their social media for customers to see. And we are then relaying any major news or announcements to our customers as soon as we hear anything. So as a vendor, we've implemented pretty heavy precautions while being at the market. As you can see in this picture, we are pretty spaced out. We normally take up 2 stalls at a market, and we're now spreading out to about five to 6 stalls. Just to provide the opportunity for our customers to be able to space out from each other. We are luckily at a time of the year where this isn't the main market season, so the setup will probably have to adjust in about a month when that main market season starts and new vendors join the market. So we'll kind of just have to see how that goes and how we'll have to adapt. But normally we have 2 people staffing a market, and now we have 3. We have 1 person handling all the money, so 2 people are not touching money at all, and then we have these extra 2 people taking orders from customers. We aren't doing like a normal display. We are keeping everything in these green bins of ours, and you can kind of see here we've moved everything to the back of the table just to help customers from looking into the bins and touching things. So we are not allowing our customers to touch anything. And we have signs out so that displays what we are selling and the money, or how much each item costs. We have a pretty strict flow and system while at market these days. We have a line that starts at one end and 2 people are taking orders. And then, like I mentioned, 1 person is handling a checkout station at the end of the line. And like I mentioned, they are the only one handling all the money. You can go ahead to the next slide. So we have signs up. We are not allowing people to use their reusable bags. Next slide. I can speak about our new online ordering system, but this is, we allow people to now pick up online orders at our farmers market. Next slide. And then, like I said, the market is doing a really great job of posting signs everywhere. They have these bright green signs up everywhere, just reminding customers to let their vendors help them with their items, so people aren't touching produce at a vendor stand. Throughout the entire market, our staff is wearing gloves, and now we're wearing masks. We are pre-bagging a few items, mostly are like our high selling items such as loose carrots, so that we can decrease as much handling at the market as possible. Next slide. So this kind of shows our customers have been doing a great job of keeping their distance themselves. So our sales are actually pretty high at the market. People might be stocking up or buying more at a higher volume, but we are still making pretty good sales. Next slide. And then this is kind of another picture that is showing how people are spacing out. So we have noticed that customers doing a great job with that. This also, having us being allowed to space out across 5 to 6 stalls has really helped with this. And then next slide. And then this is just a sign that was set up by the market. And as you can see on the ground, you can see X's, and those are marked all along the vendor stalls at 6 feet away. So telling people where to stand. So that's kind of handy so that our customers know where 6 feet lies from our stand. And then I can kind of speak briefly about our wholesale and restaurant accounts. As we all know, restaurants are not open. Some are still doing takeout. We are still here to provide to them if they need food from us for those services, but we have not seen any sales from our restaurant accounts since this situation. We are still selling to Harvest Health. It's for the first week throughout all of this, sales to them pretty much tripled. But since then, it's kind of slowed down and evened out. I think they're having a much better time now sourcing from their distributors and other farms and producers. So that's good for them. You can head to the next slide. So our final pretty major change to our overall sales and distribution is our entirely new online ordering system in response to all of this. We wanted to create another outlet for those that no longer feel safe shopping at the market and those that are most vulnerable and taking the extra precautions to keep themselves safe. So our customers are now able to go onto our website and place online orders. And we are providing 3 different pickup options each week, 2 being at our CSA pickups and then 1 at our market on Saturday. So we are already staffing those 3 pickups. So it's pretty easy to manage. And then we are also offering 1 day for home deliveries. For these online orders, we have set a minimum of $25 for pickups and then $50 for delivery plus an added $5 delivery fee. And we set these minimums just to make sure it's worthwhile for us doing the extra work of pre-packing everything and the administrative work and to cover the added costs of labor and delivering and gas and all that stuff. So I do have to say that this has all worked out extremely well for us. And so far we have seen sales that have pretty much, it's pretty much made up an extra farmer's market for us. So that's been really great. But as a lot of us know, this is kind of a strange time for the growing season where we don't have the most food to provide right now. So we're kind of trying to balance out where all of our food is going, but we're super excited to have the season changing here so that we can make a more robust online store once the summer months come and we have more product to offer. And then since we are seeing a higher demand for our food at the moment and throughout all of this, especially with a whole new sales channel of online ordering, we are actually planning on growing more food than what we had originally planned. We kind of see this as a situation that we will be around for a bit. So our field manager is currently working on this. He's mapping out areas where we can squeeze in more plantings. And last week we created an additional planting space to allow this. And this space is where cover crop normally would have been. So this is something that is on our minds. And then the final thing that I wanted to briefly touch on is our sanitizing procedures. We've always had our proper cleaning procedures in place, but we're definitely bumping it up quite a bit. We're doing a whole lot of hand washing throughout the day and after tasks. We're doing several sanitizing steps throughout the day that's assigned to 1 person each day. So we're cleaning things like doorknobs often, iPads, computers, cell phones, office area, sanitizing our greens, all of our bins, and then doing things like using paper towels after hand washing instead of cloth towels. And then I did give some examples of what we're doing at market. So I think all of this said and done, our entire team feels pretty proud of our response to this. We reacted pretty quickly to everything, and I think it was back on March 13th, when we knew we had to change things quickly. On that Friday of March 13th, my coworker and I, actually Heather, who's the owner of the farm, we both spent about 12 hours in one day creating our action plans on our website and creating a completely new online ordering system. So honestly, we have gotten incredible response from people from the day that we posted this all on our website, to our new system of online ordering, to the way we're continuing on with our CSA program safely. It was really, really important to us to let our customers know that we are aware of the situation, that our farm is taking this seriously for their health and for the health of our employees. So I would definitely say that throughout this process, we've worked hard to be really transparent with what we're doing in our current and future plans. And I actually thank social media a lot for this, for being able to inform people this way. I think people are checking their social media a lot more than websites these days, so that's been a huge help. And I think every major email I send out to our CSA members where I'm giving any updates, I sign off with encouraging them to give their feedback and any suggestions or concerns that they might have, because this is an ongoing, evolving situation. And so our team is constantly making improvements, and we're constantly talking about it and keeping it an open conversation. And like I said, as things evolve, we want to adapt so that we can safely continue to serve and provide for our customers. And that, I think, wraps things up for me.
Thank you, Rebecca. Are you there?
Yeah, thank you.
So we're going to talk next about employee health and hygiene. This is really a discussion about a culture shift in food safety. You know, we often like to talk about protecting customers and the hygiene and consumers through the products that we produce. But now we're really kind of shifting to talking about protecting our employees and farm workers. My name's Jordan DeVries. I'm a produce safety technician in West Central Michigan. And we're going to go to the next slide, please. So the good news here is that through GAPS and the produce safety rule preparedness practices, a lot of farms are already up on a lot of health and hygiene that can directly apply to their employees as well as their customers for food safety. The good news is you're already doing this. These systems are in place. The bad news is that we're going to have to do an extreme test of those systems, and there's really not any opportunity for a dry run here. We're really testing the study of behavioral science and how it applies to farms. Talking about adding in new social distancing measures, and really a doubling down of farm owners and managers having to do training, monitoring and evaluation, and then look at in-season retraining where we're having some gaps. So imprinting is going to be a very important part of this. It's another word for role modeling. This is extremely true because unlike some of our foodborne illnesses, respiratory transmitted viruses can have silent carriers. We call them asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic. And we all know that there's a big issue with the current outbreak of that causing a lot of additional illnesses. So with the exception of social distancing and face mask wearing guidance, our old tried and true practices of hand washing hygiene and farm worker health assessments are going to be what we need to rely on to get us through this on farms. Next slide, please. I created this table, and it's a kind of a generalization of what we see between the produce safety rule, our GAPS, and the CDC guidance for respiratory illness. It's a great comparison to show those things that farms are already doing that directly apply to the guidance, but then also how there are some differences in there. And if you look at the third line down, we have face masks being important for CDC guidance. Below that, we're talking really about monitoring for fever, a little bit of diarrhea, nausea, maybe even some things like sweating, chills, and a loss of appetite. But followed on that, we're not really so concerned about coughing in the produce safety rule and GAPS. It's very important for CDC guidance to have coughing to elbows and tissues and then washing hands after that. When it comes to those other produce safety rule and GAPS programs, it's still important to be concerned about any bodily fluids, so washing hands is still a good idea. Then we get into cleaning tools and equipment, particularly for those that are food contact equipment. They're not as important for our CDC guidance here on this, but what we really see an importance is anything that's going to be shared or passed between workers, we really want to make sure those are clean and sanitized. as well as any non-food contact surfaces, but surfaces that workers are going to directly interact with, be it door handles or any water dispensing, things of that nature. And lastly, social distancing is something new for farms in their worker health and hygiene training that we're going to have to add into this. So social distancing is going to be important here, both in looking at transportation to fields, in within fields, social distancing at breaks, and in other opportunities where workers can get together. This is directly from the state of Michigan's executive order, and I'd like you to pay attention to lines 3 and 5 because they directly apply to farm workers. On line 3, we really are requiring social distancing on the farm. So in that line, it's important for workers to think about that both during conducting harvesting and any packing activities, but also in break times, transportation to and from the workplace and within fields. And on point 5, this one can cause a serious loss of workforce on the farms. We're talking about if there are any ill workers presenting symptoms, they have to be prevented from entering the premises, and as well as if they at home have contact with another sick person that is suspected to have an infection, they also should be prevented from entering the premises. This is from the executive order, so it's not a law or anything like that, but it is something that is a guidance to follow for farms. So, and if line 5 happens to affect your farm, it's important to prepare for a loss of workforce and a contingency plan, be it working with neighboring farms or having a list of people that you could call to come work on the farm. And then the last question is working with others in developing a emergency plan. Who is going to manage the farm if the farm owner or manager is out sick? So social distancing here, we're talking about having social distance between farm workers and employees, trying to keep visitors away from farm workers as well. Also having staggered start times or breaks for those employees. And a real important thing to follow here is having demonstration, using that role modeling to show social distancing, and trying to develop SOPs for on the farm for that. We're talking about in migrant labor camps, a recent survey in 2017 of farm workers actually discussed if they felt comfortable with crowded surroundings, and 40 to 45% came back that they felt their living conditions could be described as crowded. So something to work through here on a lot of farms is how you're going to work out potential illness with workers, and if you have alternative living arrangements for them. And having them be part of that plan is also important as well, so that they are able to work with you on the loss of workforce. So, and again, demonstrating and talking about social distancing is going to be really important here, providing that positive reinforcement. Maybe even going through some things like providing cell phone data or Wi-Fi plans, and even asking them, you know, what reading materials or books they might want to have you pick up in case they have to be isolated. Next slide, please. So an important one here, this is telling farmers that they should go in a training, be able to talk about symptoms. Like under the produce safety rule, we like workers to be able to talk about any vomiting, diarrhea, nausea. It's equally important for respiratory illnesses to have workers feel comfortable about talking about fever and any cough or chest pains that they may be having. The workers should be monitored for worsening symptoms if they are self-isolating or home quarantining. They should be able to seek telehealth monitoring and work through medical attention if symptoms worsen. There was a recent migrant worker death in New York State at a dairy farm, so this is something that is going to hit home for some farms. Some of the signs to look for that they're going into acute respiratory distress would be trouble breathing, any pain or pressure in chest, might even have some confusion or bluish lips in the face, looking at their oxygen levels in the blood that could be dropping due to respiratory distress. And I also wanted to mention the U.S. Customs and Immigration Service had a statement. They're encouraging all of those with any symptoms, including any aliens, to seek medical attention. It will not negatively affect any alien as part of a future public charge analysis. So on this slide here, it is important to talk about a risk assessment for hand washing. So knowing when to wash hands is equally as important as about how to wash hands. The CDC issued guidance for 20-second hand washing. Recently, the Produce Marketing Agreement came up with a guidance that said they wanted 30 seconds on hand washing and to have that be thorough, both sides of the hands, front and back. And something that would also be benefit would be increased hand washing sinks. And I'd also like to talk about an opportunity here to talk about this role modeling. In a study in 2003, a new hospital system looked at hand washing opportunities. They increased twofold in a new hospital, the hand washing, but they had the doctors that were the head of the ER actually not washing their hands as often, and looking at what the intern doctors were doing for their own hand washing. In a second hospital that didn't have as many hand washing sinks and opportunities, the lead doctors were hand washing more, and they saw almost a 1.5-fold increase in hand washing among the intern and doctors. So it is important to have some role modeling here, and it might even be able to save on cost on additional hand washing sinks and field opportunities to really, as a farm owner or manager, spend that extra effort out there washing your hands. So in doing a risk assessment for produce safety, we often talk about dirt on the hands being a risk. When farm workers are talking about any respiratory illness risk assessments for hand washing, it should really be, what was the last thing that I touched, and are my hands clean enough to touch my face if I need to adjust a face mask, or if I'm going to eat or something like that, and really take time to think about that risk that is on their hands. A statement from PMA that I really like is to provide fully functioning hand washing facilities. We also want to see records of any monitoring for hand washing that happen there too. That's a useful tool. Next slide, please. The CDC recommends now having a cloth face covering worn whenever people are in a community setting. This is not a substitute for a 6-foot social distance on the farm and in the fields. It is not intended to protect the wearer. More so, it's about protecting the others from the wearer who may be asymptomatic and could potentially spread a virus. So one of the things that the CDC showed recently on a guidance for this was using a bandana with a coffee filter in it. I thought it was a really neat little hack for finding existing material on the farm that could be used for creating face masks, and it didn't really require any of the cutting that some of the homemade face masks are doing now. So again, we're talking about face coverings here. Masks should really be used for hospital workers. If you have them and they're in condition to be donated, it's a really great idea. And then use them if you can't find a face covering that's going to work for you. So we're talking about phones, tools, and equipment. These are all risk factors, transmission fomites for any respiratory virus. So when we're talking about phones, we should leave them. Tools, we should clean them, sanitizing those between use. And equipment, try not to share them, sanitize those things between shifts. So really, this is a great training opportunity for a lot of farm workers maybe that haven't already gotten into some sanitation of just keeping personal items clean and sanitized. And then really with phones, I know it's a popular thing to have to play music and keep in contact, but they really should be kept away from workers, only brought out during breaks and things of that nature because they are such a high risk. Next slide, please. When we're talking about break areas, we really want to be careful of high traffic, commonly touched sites. Those would be door handles, faucets, and any water valves. Having sanitizing agents or disinfectants in those areas, as well as just a simple checkbox record that they were cleaned and sanitized on a regular basis, is a great tool for farmers to evaluate how workers are following along on that. During breaks, it's also a great opportunity for farm managers or even crew leads to monitor employees, particularly for any looks like they might have a fever. Confusion might follow along with that, as well as any loss of thirst or appetite. And lastly, I'd like to talk about water bottles. Unmarked water bottles coming out of a cooler are a bad idea. People should have either personal bottles or single-use cups. We really don't want to see any mistaken sharing from potentially an asymptomatic person to someone that doesn't have the virus and getting them sick. Next slide, please. So in summary, we should really try to have workers feel empowered, having some accountability and agency for their own health and safety. This can be reinforced through having them be a part of the record keeping process, as well as collaborating on any training needs. It's really important for workers to be displayed the actions of social distancing and hand washing. So role modeling and imprinting is probably the best tool that farms have at their immediate disposal for this. Again, trying to show that the health of the workers on the farm is really going to be just as strong as their weakest link there. There's definitely some issues if we lose workers on farms. So having a plan of continuing operations, going through some cross training is also going to be very important. And one of the things I like to talk about having workers be a part of this as well is having them have voluntary health disclosures. This can be encouraged by opportunities for any medical caregiver virtual assessments, and then having the farm be a part of that assessment and working with their employees to manage their health. And we really want people coming forward on any symptoms they may have. The produce safety risk assessment is available to evaluate any corrective actions that farms may want to do, both with food safety and some of this, as you've seen, can apply to respiratory illness safety. And it's a great way to evaluate training needs. We've got 6 produce safety technicians throughout the state that can work with your farm on that. That's all I have.
Hey, thanks, Jordan.
I did post the link where you can find the PowerPoint and the recording of this presentation. Give us a few days to get that all together, and it will be posted on the Agri-Food Safety website at Michigan State University. Thank you so much for your time today, and stay safe.